Hands up!
Wait!
Wait! You are surrounded! On your knees! Final warning!
The
Police!
slap was
Do
so
not
loud
move!
it echoed across the entire street. For a second, I thought I imagined it. Then I saw my wife standing frozen in our front yard, her hand pressed against her cheek, eyes wide with shock. And standing in front of her was a man in a uniform I had never seen before. That moment changed everything. I rushed outside, my heart pounding harder with every step. The man stood tall like he owned the place, wearing a dark shirt with an HOA badge clipped to his chest. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look sorry. He looked irritated, like he had just dealt with a problem. "What is going on?" I shouted, running straight toward them. My wife turned toward me slowly. There was a red mark forming on her face. She looked shaken, confused, and hurt all at once. "He hit me," she said quietly. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I looked at the man. He didn't back away. He didn't even try to explain. He just crossed his arms and spoke like he was in charge. "Your property is in violation," he said firmly. I warned her multiple times to cooperate. She refused. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "You slapped her because of a property violation?" I asked, my voice low and shaking. "She became aggressive," he replied coldly. "I'm with the HOA. I have authority to enforce compliance." Something felt off immediately. I've lived in this neighborhood for years. I attend HOA meetings. I know the board members. I know the officers. I've never seen this man before in my life. My wife stepped closer to me. "He came yelling about the garden," she said softly. "I told him to come back when you were home. He got angry. Then he just slapped me." The neighbors had started noticing. Curtains moved. Doors opened. People were quietly watching from a distance. The man shifted slightly, trying to look official. But the badge on his chest looked cheap. The uniform didn't match anything I'd ever seen. That's when the realization hit me. This man wasn't just aggressive. He might not even be HOA. I took a step forward and looked him straight in the eye. "Show me your ID," I said. And for the first time since I walked outside, he hesitated. That 1 second told me everything. That small hesitation changed the entire situation. A real HOA officer wouldn't need to think before showing identification. They would have pulled it out instantly, confident and prepared. But this man stood there frozen for a moment, his eyes flicking toward the street, then back to me. "Sir, I already told you who I am," he said, trying to sound calm. "There's no need to make this difficult." I didn't move. "If you're official," I replied steadily, "then showing your ID shouldn't be a problem." My wife stood behind me, still shaken, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I could feel her trembling. That alone made it impossible for me to step back. I wasn't going to let this man walk away like nothing happened. The neighbors were watching more openly now. A few had stepped onto their porches. Others stood at the edge of their driveways. Everyone could sense the tension building. The man finally reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He held it up quickly, just for a second, then lowered it again. I caught a glimpse of it. Something was wrong. The logo looked faded. The text didn't look aligned properly. It looked like something printed at home, not something official. I stepped closer. "Let me see it," I said. He pulled his hand back slightly. "That's not necessary. I already showed you." Now I was sure. "No," I said calmly. "It is necessary." His jaw tightened. He looked around again, clearly uncomfortable. The confidence he had earlier was starting to disappear. His shoulders weren't as straight. His voice wasn't as firm. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "What are you doing?" he asked quickly. "I'm calling the HOA president," I replied. "I know him personally. If you're real, he'll confirm it in seconds." For the first time, I saw panic flash across his face. "That's not needed," he said quickly. "We can handle this here." I ignored him and started dialing. My wife whispered softly, "I don't recognize him. I've never seen him before." "I know," I replied quietly. "Neither have I." The phone rang as I kept my eyes locked on the man. He shifted his weight again, glancing down the street like he was measuring distance. That's when it hit me. He wasn't worried about being proven right. He was worried about being exposed. And the moment the HOA president answered the call, everything was about to fall apart. The HOA president answered on the third ring. "Hello," he said, his voice calm and familiar. "Hey, it's me from Maple Street," I said quickly, keeping my eyes locked on the man standing in front of me. "I need to ask something urgent. Do you have someone here right now? A man claiming to be WA just showed up and says our property is in violation." There was a pause on the line. Then confusion. "What? No," he replied. "We didn't send anyone out today. And we never send officers alone. Who is this person?" That was all I needed to hear. My grip tightened on the phone as I slowly lowered it. The air suddenly felt heavier. The neighbors had grown quiet, sensing that something serious had just been confirmed. I looked straight at the man. "They said they didn't send anyone," I said clearly, loud enough for people nearby to hear. His face changed instantly. The confidence, the authority, the fake control he had earlier, it all slipped away. His jaw tightened, and his eyes started moving again, scanning the street like he was searching for a way out. "You must have called the wrong person," he muttered. "I'm from the regional side. They don't always know everything." But his voice didn't sound strong anymore. It sounded uncertain. I stepped closer. "What's your name?" I asked. He didn't answer. "What WA do you work for?" I asked again. Still nothing. Behind me, one of the neighbors spoke up. "I've never seen him around here before." Another voice followed. "Me neither. He just showed up yelling." The man shifted backward slightly, his foot scraping against the driveway. That tiny movement said everything. He was losing control. My wife found her voice again. "You came onto our property and started shouting about the garden," she said, her voice shaking but steady. "I told you to leave. Then you slapped me." The crowd went silent. The man looked at her, then back at me, clearly realizing that he was now surrounded by witnesses. He tried to force a calm expression. "Look, this is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "I was just doing my job." "You don't have a job here," I replied. I raised my phone again. This time, I didn't call the HOA. I dialed 911. As soon as the operator answered, I spoke clearly and firmly. "There's a man here impersonating an HOA officer. He assaulted my wife. We need police here immediately." The man's eyes widened the moment he heard that. And suddenly, he turned and started walking quickly toward the street. The moment he turned and started walking away, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. He wasn't running yet, but his pace was quick, urgent, like someone trying to leave before things got worse. "He's trying to leave," I told the 911 operator, keeping my voice steady as I watched him move toward the sidewalk. "Officers are already on their way," she replied. "Stay where you are and do not approach him." Every instinct in me wanted to run after him. My fists clenched as I watched him get farther from our driveway. But I looked back at my wife, still shaken, standing near the front door. I couldn't leave her alone. So I stayed right where I was. The man reached the edge of the street and stopped for a moment, glancing back at us. He looked nervous now, nothing like the confident figure who had been shouting just minutes earlier. His shoulders were tense, his hands kept moving, like he didn't know what to do with them. Neighbors had gathered more openly now. A few stood at the curb, watching closely. Some were whispering, others had their phones out, recording everything. One of the older men from down the street called out, "Police are coming. You should stay right there." The stranger didn't respond, he just stared down the road. Then we heard it, sirens, faint at first, then louder. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, growing stronger with every second. Red and blue lights appeared at the end of the street, flashing between the houses. The man's posture changed instantly. His head dropped slightly, like he already knew there was no way out now. Within seconds, the first patrol car turned onto our street, followed by another right behind it. The flashing lights reflected off windows, cars, and the pavement, making the entire scene feel intense and real. Two officers stepped out quickly. "Sir, stop right there," one of them called firmly. The man froze. He didn't try to run anymore. One officer walked toward him while another came straight to us. "Who made the call?" the officer asked. "I did," I said. "He showed up pretending to be WA. Then he slapped my wife." The officer's expression turned serious as he looked toward her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She nodded slowly, still holding her cheek. Meanwhile, the other officers were already speaking to the man, asking for identification. This time, he couldn't walk away. The entire street had fallen silent as the officers surrounded him. No one was whispering now. No one was moving. Every neighbor stood still, watching what would happen next. "Sir, keep your hands where we can see them," one officer said firmly. The man nodded quickly. The confidence he had earlier was completely gone. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes stayed fixed on the ground. "Do you have identification?" another officer asked. He reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out the same card he had flashed at me earlier. This time, he handed it over without arguing. The officer examined it carefully. From where I stood, I could see the moment something didn't add up. The officer tilted the card slightly, looking closer at the logo and the print. "This isn't official," the officer said calmly. The man swallowed hard. "It's from the association," he replied, his voice much quieter than before. "Which association?" the officer asked. He didn't answer. The silence stretched longer than before. Everyone could feel the tension. Another officer stepped forward. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back." For a second, the man just stood there, like he was hoping something would magically fix the situation. But nothing changed. No one spoke for him. No one defended him. Slowly, he turned around. The metal handcuffs clicked loudly as the officer secured them around his wrists. That sharp sound echoed across the street, and in that moment, it felt like everything had finally become real. My wife stood beside me now. She wasn't hiding behind me anymore. She watched quietly, her expression a mix of relief and anger. An officer walked over to her gently. "Ma'am, can you tell me exactly what happened?" he asked. She took a deep breath and explained everything. How the man came onto the property, how he started shouting about the garden decorations, how she asked him to leave, and how he suddenly slapped her when she tried to step back. The officer listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. "Did you recognize him at all?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I've never seen him before." I added, "I called the HOA president. They said they didn't send anyone." The officer exchanged a quick look with his partner. "That makes sense," he said quietly. "We've had reports of someone pretending to be HOA in nearby neighborhoods." My stomach tightened. This wasn't the first time. The officer's words stayed in my head. Someone pretending to be HOA in nearby neighborhoods. I looked toward the patrol car where the man now sat in handcuffs, staring down at the floor. Just minutes ago, he had been standing in our yard acting like he had power, like he controlled everything. Now he looked smaller, nervous, and completely exposed. "What do you mean there were reports?" I asked. The officer glanced toward his partner before answering. "Over the past few weeks, a few homeowners called about a man showing up, claiming there were violations. Some said he demanded money for immediate fines. Others said he threatened to report them." My wife and I exchanged a look. "So he's been doing this to other families too?" she asked quietly. The officer nodded. "We just didn't have enough to go on before. No one had video. No one could identify him clearly. But this," he looked back toward the patrol car. "This changes everything." One of the other officers began searching the man's belongings near the hood of the police car. He pulled out a small folder and opened it. Inside were printed papers, fake warning notices, and multiple badges. "All fake," the officer said, holding them up. "These are printed, not official." Hearing that made my chest tighten. This man had come prepared. He wasn't just pretending for one moment. He had been planning this. My wife wrapped her arms around herself, still trying to process it all. "He looked so confident when he first walked up," she said softly. "I thought he was real." "That's how they make it work," the officer replied gently. "They act like they belong. They use fear to control the situation." A few neighbors stepped closer now, offering support. One woman brought my wife a glass of water. Another man shook his head in disbelief. "I saw him yelling earlier," the neighbor said. "Didn't think it would turn into this." The officers continued writing notes, asking us a few more questions. Every detail mattered now. What he said, how he acted, when he arrived. As they finished, one officer closed his notebook and looked at us seriously. "He's being taken in for assault and impersonation," he said. "We'll need statements from both of you later, but you did the right thing calling immediately." I nodded slowly. As they began placing him fully inside the patrol car, the man looked up for the first time since being cuffed. For a brief moment, our eyes met. There was no anger in his face now. Just fear. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. If I hadn't come home when I did, things could have been much worse. As the patrol car door slammed shut, the flashing lights reflected across the houses, the pavement, and the faces of everyone still standing outside. The tension that had filled the street just minutes ago slowly began to fade, replaced by quiet whispers and deep breaths of relief. The car pulled away slowly, carrying the man who had walked into our lives pretending to have authority. Now he was gone. I stood in the driveway for a moment, watching the red and blue lights disappear at the end of the street. Everything felt strangely calm again, but inside, my mind was still replaying the moment over and over. The slap, my wife's shocked expression, his fake confidence, that single second where I noticed something didn't feel right. I turned toward my wife. The mark on her cheek had faded slightly, but it was still there. A reminder of what had happened. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. She nodded, but her voice was soft. "I'm just glad you came home when you did." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. For a few seconds, we just stood there together in silence, letting everything settle. Neighbors began walking back to their homes, but many of them stopped to check on us first. Some offered kind words, others shook their heads, still in disbelief that something like this had happened on our quiet street. One older neighbor said, if you hadn't questioned him, he probably would have gone to the next house. That thought stayed with me. Because it was true. He had the uniform, the fake badge, the attitude. Anyone could have believed him. Anyone could have felt pressured or scared enough to listen. But one small moment changed everything. That hesitation when I asked for his ID. That was the crack in his story. Later that evening, after everything had finally quieted down, I sat in the living room thinking about how quickly it all happened. Just minutes earlier, he had been standing in our yard, acting like he owned the place. Seconds later, the truth started coming out. And within minutes, he was in handcuffs. All because we refused to stay silent. All because we questioned something that didn't feel right. Sometimes, the biggest lies fall apart from the smallest detail. And that day, one question exposed everything.
Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. If you enjoyed don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments.